The city was quiet in the early morning, with sunlight slowly spilling over tall buildings. People were going about their usual routines, sipping tea, walking to work, and chatting in small groups. But the peace of the morning was about to be broken by shocking news. Headlines flashed on every news website and television channel. Royal Guard sues J.D. Vance for $100 million. Royal Guard was not an ordinary man. He had worked for years in a field that required discipline, honesty, and courage. Many admired him for his dedication and integrity. Now he had taken a bold step that no one had expected. He had filed a lawsuit against J.D. Vance, a man who had recently risen in politics and had a growing reputation in the country. The claim was massive, asking for $100 million in damages. The news spread quickly. People stopped in the streets to discuss it. Some could not believe that a lawsuit could involve such a large sum. Others wondered what secrets might be hidden behind it. Royal Guard himself had prepared for this moment for a long time. He had documents, emails, and records that he believed proved his case. More than the money, he wanted people to know the truth. He had seen things, worked closely with important people, and understood how decisions could affect not just individuals, but entire communities. For Royal, the lawsuit was a way to show that accountability was important, no matter how powerful someone might be. J.D. Vance, on the other hand, seemed calm on the surface. He appeared at press events with a confident smile, shaking hands with supporters and talking about his vision for the future. But behind the cameras, the atmosphere was tense. His advisors whispered in offices filled with papers and laptops. They had expected challenges in his career, but nothing like this. The lawsuit could damage not just his reputation, but also his chances of growing as a political leader. Every step had to be carefully planned. As the news spread, ordinary citizens began discussing the case. In cafes, people argued quietly over coffee. Some said Royal Guard was brave, standing up to someone so influential. Others felt it was risky, and they worried about the consequences. Many wondered what Royal could possibly reveal that would make a $100 million lawsuit seem reasonable. The city felt like it had suddenly entered a suspenseful story, and everyone wanted to know what would happen next. Royal Guard's story was more complicated than most people realized. Years ago, he had worked in different departments and had access to information that was not publicly known. He had tried to stay loyal, but over time he noticed patterns of actions that he believed were unfair or wrong. Royal kept quiet for a long time, thinking he could avoid conflict. But as time passed, he understood that staying silent allowed mistakes to continue and hurt many people. Filing the lawsuit was his way of finally stepping forward. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance was preparing his defense. He met with lawyers, advisors, and close friends to discuss every possible scenario. He knew the case could attract media attention and public debate. He had to stay composed and careful. Even small mistakes in words or actions could be used against him. J.D. understood that his career might never be the same if the lawsuit revealed truths that people did not know before. By the evening, the city was buzzing. Television anchors repeated the headlines, journalists wrote opinion pieces, and social media users shared their thoughts in messages and videos. People from all walks of life felt curious, anxious, and excited. They wanted to know why Royal Guard had decided to take such a bold step. What could he reveal that would challenge a man like J.D. Vance? As night fell, Royal Guard sat in his home reviewing his documents and planning the next steps carefully. He felt a mix of nervousness and determination. He knew that the path ahead would be difficult. People might try to criticize him, ignore him, or challenge his claims. But he also knew that truth and courage were stronger than fear. Royal had made his decision, and he was ready to face the consequences no matter how challenging they might be. The lawsuit had begun, and the city had already changed. People were talking, wondering, and waiting. Everyone wanted to know what Royal Guard would reveal next and how it could affect J.D. Vance. The story was just starting, and the first chapter had set the stage for a battle that would go beyond the courtroom and touch the hearts and minds of citizens everywhere. After the shocking news of the lawsuit, the city's energy changed. People spoke in hushed tones about Royal Guard and J.D. Vance. Questions filled the air. What could Royal possibly know? Why had he waited so long to act? Everyone sensed that the story was deeper than just money or legal claims. Royal Guard had once worked closely with J.D. Vance. He had seen how decisions were made, how plans were carried out, and how information was sometimes hidden from the public. He had noticed patterns that bothered him for years. Royal was not someone who acted impulsively. He had watched, observed, and collected evidence patiently, waiting for the right time. Now that the lawsuit was filed, he was ready to bring the truth to light. Royal's statement to the media was brief but powerful. He said he had information the public deserves to know. That statement alone caused speculation to grow wildly. News channels debated endlessly. Journalists discussed possible scenarios. Some wondered if the revelations could damage J.D. Vance's career permanently. Others believed it was exaggeration. The city felt like a stage, with every citizen watching an unfolding drama. J.D. Vance, despite his calm appearance, was not unaffected. In his private office, he paced while advisors spoke in low voices. Every piece of evidence Royal had collected could challenge the public's trust in him. J.D. had built his career carefully, and now that career seemed to shake under the weight of questions. He asked his team to prepare answers, explanations, and strategies. He knew that the lawsuit was more than a court battle. It was a test of reputation, influence, and public perception. Meanwhile, Royal continued to prepare. He reviewed documents, messages, and reports. Every detail mattered. He knew that some people might try to discredit him, so he had to be precise. Royal also understood that this was not only about him. The lawsuit was about accountability and truth. He hoped people would see that standing for what is right often requires courage, even when the opponent is powerful. Citizens followed the story closely. Social media was full of discussions. People shared opinions, debated fairness, and predicted possible outcomes. Some supported Royal, praising him for bravery. Others defended J.D., saying that powerful people often face challenges and that the lawsuit might be motivated by personal disagreements. The city had divided into groups, each watching closely, each forming opinions before any court decision. Royal also considered the consequences carefully. He understood that his life would change forever once the lawsuit gained momentum. He might face criticism, misunderstandings, and pressure, but he felt a sense of responsibility. The truth, he believed, should not be hidden. If his revelations could prevent mistakes or protect people in the future, it would be worth the personal challenges. His determination gave him strength to move forward. J.D. Vance, too, realized that he needed to act carefully. He began reaching out to trusted friends and advisors, seeking advice on public communication. He wanted to maintain his reputation and explain his side without creating further doubts. The court might determine the legal outcome, but public opinion had already become a powerful factor. J.D. understood that every move, every word, and every appearance would be analyzed by citizens, journalists, and political commentators. As days passed, anticipation grew. The courtroom had not yet opened, but the city felt like it was waiting for a storm. People discussed every small clue, every rumor, and every statement from Royal and J.D. There was excitement, curiosity, and tension in the air. Everyone wanted to know what Royal would reveal first and how J.D. would respond. Royal Guard felt the weight of responsibility but remained steady. He had chosen this path knowing it would be challenging. His courage and preparation gave him confidence. He hoped that citizens would see that truth and fairness mattered more than fear or power. J.D. Vance, on the other hand, prepared for every possible scenario, aware that the lawsuit could influence more than just his career. The stage was set. The story had begun, and the public watched with bated breath. Secrets were about to surface. Questions were waiting for answers, and both men knew that the coming days could change the city and their lives forever. Inside a tall office building, J.D. Vance sat at a long table surrounded by advisors and lawyers. The sunlight streamed through the large windows, but it could not ease the tension in the room. Every face was serious, every word carefully measured. J.D. knew that the lawsuit filed by Royal Guard was more than a legal challenge. It was a storm that could change his life and career. Royal Guard had already shown the world that he was prepared. His team had collected documents, emails, and notes that suggested past actions taken by J.D. needed explanation. Now J.D. had to prepare his response. He leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully. One wrong move, one poorly chosen word could damage his reputation further. He listened as his lawyers reviewed each piece of evidence, analyzing strengths and weaknesses. Outside, reporters gathered near the building. Cameras flashed, microphones were ready, and journalists whispered about the coming statements. They could feel the tension even from the street. The lawsuit was not just a legal battle, it had become a public spectacle. Citizens followed every news update, eagerly waiting for what would happen next. Some supported Royal Guard, admiring his courage. Others defended J.D. Vance, believing in his leadership and experience. Meanwhile, Royal Guard sat in his home, quietly reviewing his notes. His preparation was meticulous. He had spent years observing events, collecting evidence, and documenting everything carefully. Now it was time to make sure every fact was presented clearly and honestly. Royal knew the lawsuit was risky. He could face criticism, challenges, and attempts to discredit him. But he also understood that truth was worth the risk. Every piece of information he planned to present had been carefully verified. Back in JD's office, the conversation shifted to strategy. Advisors suggested approaches for handling questions from the press, statements for social media, and explanations for public events. JD listened carefully. He had always known that leadership required careful decisions, but this situation tested him in ways he had never imagined. He realized that the outcome of the lawsuit was only part of the challenge. Public perception, trust, and credibility were also at stake. Royal Guard had anticipated this. He knew that public opinion could be as powerful as any legal ruling. That was why he had prepared statements for media coverage and had organized his evidence in a way that was clear, honest, and hard to dispute. He wanted people to understand not just the details of the case, but also why accountability mattered. Royal believed that citizens deserved transparency from those in positions of power. As the days passed, both sides prepared intensively. J.D. Vance reviewed documents repeatedly, discussing every detail with his legal team. Royal Guard rehearsed presentations, anticipating questions, and imagining how J.D.'s team might respond. Both men understood that this was more than a dispute between two individuals. It had become a story that involved an entire city, its citizens, and their trust in leadership. At night, the city never truly slept. Conversations continued in homes, cafes, and workplaces. People debated what the lawsuit might reveal, what J.D. Vance's responses could be, and how the situation would affect the future. Social media was full of opinions, predictions, and analyses. The tension was everywhere, but so was curiosity. Everyone wanted to be ready for the next part of the story, the next revelation, and the next courtroom appearance. Royal Guard remained calm. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also a sense of purpose. This was not about revenge or anger. It was about truth, honesty, and fairness. He believed that standing up for what was right, even against someone powerful, was necessary for justice. J.D. Vance, too, faced his own pressures. He understood that leadership was not just about winning or losing. It was about credibility, trust, and the ability to face challenges openly. The courtroom had not yet opened, but the stage was ready. The city awaited, curious and tense. Inside offices and homes, people imagined what could happen next. Secrets were ready to be revealed. Questions needed answers. Both Royal Guard and J.D. Vance prepared for the moments that could define their lives and influence the future of the city. The morning of the trial arrived, and the courthouse buzzed with activity. Reporters crowded the halls, cameras flashed, and microphones were ready to capture every word. Citizens lined the streets outside, eager for a glimpse of the people at the center of the storm. Royal Guard walked calmly through the courthouse doors, carrying a briefcase full of documents. His expression was steady, but his mind raced with anticipation. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. J.D. Vance sat at one side, flanked by his lawyers and advisors. His calm exterior masked the anxiety he felt. This was not just a legal proceeding. It was a test of trust and reputation. Royal Guard was on the other side, ready to present his evidence and tell the story he had prepared for years. Every eye in the room watched carefully. Every detail mattered. The judge called the courtroom to order, and the trial began. Royal Guard stood and spoke clearly, explaining the reasons for the lawsuit. He outlined the actions he claimed had caused harm, using evidence he had carefully collected. The courtroom listened in silence, absorbing every word. Some people nodded in agreement, others frowned in doubt. The tension in the room was electric, as if every heartbeat was synchronized with the unfolding events. J.D. Vance's lawyers responded next. They asked questions, challenged points, and tried to show that some claims were exaggerated or misinterpreted. JD remained composed, answering with careful precision. He knew that every word would be analyzed by the public and media. Even a small mistake could create a new wave of doubt or criticism. He focused on clarity, honesty, and calm, hoping to maintain credibility in the eyes of the citizens. Royal Guard presented documents, emails, and notes that illustrated his points. He had anticipated the questions that JD's team might ask and had prepared clear explanations. Some of the information surprised the audience. People leaned forward in their seats, listening to details that had never been shared before. Royal's voice was firm but respectful. He wanted to make a strong case, not humiliate JD Vance. He hoped that truth and fairness would speak louder than conflict. The media outside reported every moment. Headlines updated constantly, and social media exploded with comments and reactions. Citizens debated the evidence, the claims, and JD Vance's responses. Some praised Royal Guard for bravery and honesty. Others defended JD, emphasizing his accomplishments and leadership. The city felt like it had become a live stage, with every resident a spectator of a drama that could change the future. As the trial continued, tension grew. Royal Guard revealed information that had never been public. Emails, records, and detailed notes painted a picture that left many people surprised. JD's team worked quickly to respond, pointing out explanations and clarifying actions. The courtroom felt like a chessboard, with each side anticipating the moves of the other. Every statement mattered, every reaction counted, and every piece of evidence influenced public opinion. Royal Guard watched carefully as the trial unfolded. He remained calm, letting the evidence speak for itself. He had not come to win with anger or force. He had come to present the truth. JD Vance, meanwhile, realized that the trial was testing more than just legal skill. It was testing his ability to maintain trust and credibility in front of an audience that included both the court and the entire city. By the end of the day, the courtroom was exhausted but alert. Reporters prepared summaries, lawyers reviewed notes, and citizens followed the story online. Everyone sensed that the trial was only beginning and that more revelations were yet to come. The courtroom drama had started, and both Royal Guard and JD Vance knew that every next moment could influence not just the outcome of the case but also the perception of their lives and careers. As the doors closed for the evening, the city waited in suspense. Questions hung in the air. Secrets were slowly coming to light, and both men prepared themselves for the days ahead, knowing that the trial would continue to reveal truths that no one could ignore. The courtroom was filled with tension as the trial entered its second week. Citizens, journalists, and political analysts packed the room and waited anxiously. Everyone wanted to know what Royal Guard would reveal next. Royal knew the moment was important. He had prepared carefully, and he understood that his next words could change public opinion forever. Royal rose from his seat and carefully placed a folder on the table. Inside were documents that had never been seen before. Emails, letters, and official records detailed decisions and actions that had previously been hidden from the public. Royal spoke clearly and calmly, explaining the meaning of each document. His voice carried authority, but there was no anger in it. He wanted people to see the truth, not to create conflict. The courtroom listened in silence. Some people leaned forward, eyes wide, as they followed the evidence. The details were surprising. Actions that had seemed harmless now had new meaning. Royal explained how certain decisions had affected many people, how trust had been tested, and how transparency had been missing. The documents revealed patterns and choices that the public had never known about. Every statement he made added weight to his claims. JD Vance listened carefully, his expression composed but thoughtful. His lawyers tried to respond, explaining circumstances and offering clarifications. They pointed out that some actions had been misunderstood, and that decisions were made in complex situations. JD's calm demeanor helped him maintain credibility, but the audience could see the strain in his eyes. Even small mistakes in explanation could shift public perception. Outside the courtroom, news channels broadcast every detail. Social media exploded with commentary. Citizens debated the meaning of the documents and what they revealed about JD Vance. Supporters of Royal Guard praised his courage, saying he had shown honesty in a world full of secrecy. Supporters of JD Vance emphasized his leadership, arguing that the revelations were only part of a bigger story. Everyone was engaged, and the city felt like it was watching history unfold. Royal's strategy was simple but effective. He did not use harsh words or exaggeration. He let the evidence speak for itself. Each document he presented built a clear story, showing a pattern of choices and decisions. He made sure that people could see the reasoning behind each point. Citizens began to understand not only the facts but also why Royal had filed the lawsuit. The case was no longer about money. It was about transparency, fairness, and accountability. J.D. Vance realized the power of public opinion more than ever. Winning in court might not be enough if citizens lost trust. He spoke carefully when questioned, providing explanations and context. He emphasized his intentions and the challenges he faced when making decisions. J.D. hoped that people would consider the full picture before forming judgments. Every word mattered, and every moment was being recorded and analyzed. As the trial progressed, both men understood that the coming days would be decisive. Royal Guard had shown courage in revealing what he knew. J.D. Vance faced the challenge of explaining his actions while maintaining credibility. The city followed every update with great interest, waiting to see who would gain support and how the revelations would affect the political landscape. By the end of the day, a sense of suspense filled the city. Citizens discussed the new information in homes, workplaces, and online communities. Questions filled the air. How would J.D. respond next? Could the revelations change public trust permanently? Royal Guard felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. He had taken the first step in showing the truth. He knew there were more revelations to come, more questions to answer, and more moments that could shape the future. The courtroom doors closed for the evening, but the story was far from over. Both men returned to their offices, reviewing documents, preparing statements, and thinking about the next day. Citizens went to bed with minds full of questions. Royal Guard and J.D. Vance knew that the trial had entered a new phase. The first public reveal had shaken the city, and everyone waited for what would happen next. The day after Royal Guard's public reveal, the city felt different. News outlets were flooded with updates about the trial. Every television channel, newspaper, and social media platform focused on the story. Citizens discussed the events in cafes, offices, and homes. The courtroom drama had become more than a legal case. It was a story that involved everyone's curiosity and judgment. Royal Guard sat quietly in his office, reviewing documents once again. He had expected attention, but the scale surprised him. Reporters were calling, journalists were requesting interviews, and ordinary citizens were asking questions online. Despite the chaos, Royal remained calm. He knew that the information he had revealed was clear, and his focus was on presenting truth in the clearest way possible. His goal was not to attack J.D. Vance personally, but to show facts that had been hidden for years. J.D. Vance, meanwhile, felt the weight of the public eye more than ever. His team monitored news channels, social media trends, and opinion polls. Each comment, each post, and each report seemed to carry a judgment. Supporters praised his leadership and experience, but critics questioned his choices and decisions. J.D. understood that winning in court was only one part of the challenge. Public perception could influence his career in ways that a legal decision could not. The media frenzy grew daily. Headlines screamed about Royal Guard's revelations. Social media was full of debates, discussions, and opinions. Citizens shared what they thought, forming groups that supported either Royal or J.D. Some praised Royal's courage and honesty, saying it was rare to see someone stand up against a powerful figure. Others defended J.D. Vance, emphasizing his achievements and explaining that decisions made in politics were often complex. The city was divided, but everyone was engaged. Royal Guard noticed that the attention was having an effect. People were asking questions, seeking clarity, and discussing transparency. Citizens began to understand that the lawsuit was not only about money, but about fairness, accountability, and honesty. Royal realized that public awareness was becoming a tool for change. He had started a conversation that could influence not just the trial but the future of leadership in the city. J.D. Vance, in response, started planning ways to communicate directly with the public. He appeared on interviews, wrote statements, and spoke at community meetings. He explained his decisions, addressed misunderstandings, and tried to restore trust. J.D. knew that clarity and openness were essential. He also knew that citizens were paying attention to every detail, every word, and every action. One small mistake could be amplified and affect his credibility. As days passed, the city remained captivated. Cafes, offices, and homes buzzed with discussions about the trial. People speculated on the next revelations, the possible outcomes, and the effect on J.D. Vance's career. Citizens followed live news updates, read opinion pieces, and shared thoughts on social media. The story had grown beyond the courtroom and had become a part of everyday life. Royal Guard maintained his calm and focus. He knew that the attention could be overwhelming, but he also understood that it was necessary. Transparency required patience, precision, and honesty. Every statement he made was measured, every document presented with care. Royal's careful approach gained respect from many citizens, even those who were not directly involved in the trial. J.D. Vance, too, felt the pressure, but he focused on communication and explanation. He emphasized his intentions, his decisions, and the challenges he faced. He hoped that citizens would consider the full story before forming opinions. J.D. realized that leadership was not only about actions, but also about trust and perception. By the end of the week, the city was fully absorbed in the story. Citizens followed updates eagerly, discussing every new detail. The trial had started as a legal case, but it had grown into a public conversation about honesty, fairness, and accountability. Both Royal Guard and J.D. Vance knew that the media frenzy would continue, and that public opinion could shape the future as much as any courtroom ruling. The stage was set for the next developments. Citizens waited with curiosity and concern. Royal Guard and J.D. Vance prepared for the coming days, knowing that more revelations, explanations, and decisions would continue to influence the city and its people. The courtroom drama and media frenzy had captured the city's attention, but behind the scenes, new developments were taking shape. Some political figures, who had remained quiet at first, began to openly support Royal Guard. They spoke about transparency, accountability, and the importance of honesty and leadership. Their voices added strength to Royal's case, and people started to pay even closer attention to the trial. Royal Guard noticed these new allies with a quiet satisfaction. He had always believed in truth and fairness, but the support from respected figures made him feel that his message was reaching the right people. Citizens saw that the lawsuit was not just about a conflict between two individuals. It had become a conversation about ethics, responsibility, and leadership. Royal felt a sense of purpose. He knew that every detail he presented mattered more than ever. J.D. Vance, on the other hand, began to feel the pressure of these unexpected alliances. He met with advisors and close friends to discuss strategies for responding. The courtroom was only one arena. Public opinion and political influence had become equally important. J.D. realized that winning legally would not be enough if citizens began to question his credibility. He needed a way to rebuild trust while addressing the claims made by Royal Guard. Royal continued to present evidence in court, showing patterns of decisions and actions that raised questions about transparency. Each document he revealed seemed to attract more attention from journalists and citizens. The media covered every detail, analyzing the implications and highlighting the reactions of political figures. Social media discussions were full of debates, predictions, and shared opinions. The city was alive with curiosity, and everyone was waiting for the next move. As the trial progressed, J.D. Vance attempted to communicate more directly with citizens. He spoke at community events, met with leaders, and held interviews to clarify his actions. He explained the challenges he faced, the decisions he had made, and his intentions behind them. J.D. hoped that openness would help people understand the complexity of the situation. He realized that leadership was not just about power, it was also about trust, communication, and accountability. Royal Guard observed these efforts carefully. He knew that J.D. was trying to regain support, but he also understood that the truth he had revealed could not be ignored. Citizens were thinking critically, asking questions and analyzing the evidence. Royal felt a quiet confidence. He had prepared carefully, presented his case clearly, and remained respectful throughout. People were starting to see the importance of honesty and transparency in leadership. Unexpectedly, some members of J.D.'s team began to reconsider their positions. They realized that certain decisions had not been as transparent as they should have been. Some advisors quietly suggested ways to improve communication, acknowledge past mistakes, and show accountability. J.D. listened, knowing that adapting and responding responsibly could help maintain some trust among citizens. The alliances forming on both sides created a complex environment where every decision mattered. The city continued to follow the trial with great interest. Citizens discussed developments in homes, workplaces, and online communities. People debated the implications of Royal's evidence, JD's responses, and the support from political allies. The trial was no longer just a legal matter. It had become a lesson in ethics, leadership, and responsibility. Royal Guard's courage had inspired many, and JD Vance faced the challenge of balancing defense with openness. As the days passed, both men prepared for the next stage of the trial. Royal focused on presenting more evidence while maintaining clarity and honesty. JD focused on responding thoughtfully, explaining decisions and showing that he valued trust and integrity. Citizens followed closely, eager to see what would happen next. By the end of the week, it was clear that the trial had become more than a conflict between two men. It was a public story about accountability, courage, and leadership. Unexpected alliances had added new dimensions, showing that truth and fairness could inspire support even in complicated situations. Both Royal Guard and JD Vance knew that the coming days would be decisive and that the city was watching every move. The courtroom was full of anticipation as the final day of the trial arrived. Citizens, journalists, and political analysts packed the room, eager to witness the conclusion. The weeks of intense scrutiny, revelations, and debates had built up a sense of suspense that was almost unbearable. Everyone wanted to know how the lawsuit between Royal Guard and JD Vance would end. Royal Guard entered the courtroom calmly, carrying the documents and evidence that had made the story headline news. He had spent months preparing, ensuring every detail was accurate and every statement was clear. His focus was steady. He knew the moment had come to present his final summary and let the truth speak for itself. Royal had no personal anger in his heart, only a desire for honesty and accountability. JD Vance sat quietly at the other side, his advisors whispering softly as they reviewed last-minute notes. He remained composed, though inside he felt the pressure of weeks of public scrutiny. The trial had not only tested his legal skills, but also his ability to maintain trust and credibility. He knew that the courtroom's decision would matter, but public perception had already influenced much of his career. JD took a deep breath and prepared to face the final proceedings with clarity and integrity. The judge called the courtroom to order and asked Royal Guard to speak. Royal outlined the key points of his case one last time, emphasizing facts, evidence, and patterns that he had carefully documented. His voice was calm, respectful, and clear. The courtroom listened closely, absorbing every detail. Citizens who had followed the story for weeks felt a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and understanding as Royal presented his points. JD Vance's lawyers responded, clarifying decisions and explaining the context of past actions. JD himself spoke briefly, emphasizing that he had always acted with intention, care, and responsibility. He acknowledged the importance of transparency and assured the public that he valued trust, fairness, and accountability. His words were measured and sincere, and many people noticed his effort to explain without deflecting responsibility. Outside the courtroom, news channels reported every moment. Social media was alive with discussion, sharing updates and analyzing reactions. Citizens debated the evidence, JD's explanations, and the courage of Royal Guard. Opinions varied, but the overall conversation focused on accountability, ethics, and leadership. The trial had transformed from a legal battle into a lesson for the city about honesty and responsibility. After hours of discussion, the judge announced the decision. JD Vance faced consequences that affected aspects of his public career, though he remained a political figure. The court recognized that Royal Guard's evidence was credible and that transparency had been missing in some decisions. At the same time, JD's intentions were acknowledged and he was given the opportunity to continue in public service, provided he maintained openness and accountability. The decision balanced fairness, justice, and responsibility. Royal Guard felt a quiet satisfaction. He had achieved what he had set out to do, not to destroy JD Vance, but to reveal the truth. He had shown that courage, preparation, and honesty could make a difference. Citizens respected him for standing up to someone powerful, and his actions sparked discussions about leadership and accountability that would continue for years. JD Vance, while affected by the outcome, understood the importance of learning from the trial. He accepted the court's decision, acknowledged the concerns raised, and committed to improving communication and transparency in the future. The experience had tested him in unexpected ways, but it had also shown him the power of trust, openness, and responsibility. The city slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the story of the lawsuit remained in everyone's minds. Citizens had witnessed a battle not just of legal arguments but of truth, ethics, and courage. People discussed the trial in homes, workplaces, and online communities, reflecting on the importance of honesty, accountability, and leadership in their own lives. Royal Guard and J.D. Vance moved forward in different ways. Royal continued to advocate for transparency and fairness, feeling a sense of accomplishment. J.D. focused on restoring trust and demonstrating that leaders must always act responsibly and openly. The trial had changed them both, and it had changed the city, reminding citizens that courage, truth, and accountability are the foundations of a strong community. The story ended, but its lessons remained. The city had witnessed the power of honesty, the courage to stand for truth, and the responsibility that comes with leadership. Royal Guard and J.D. Vance had both played their parts, and the citizens were left with a clear understanding. Transparency, fairness, and integrity matter more than anything.